In this tutorial, we're going to start talking about our very first trigonometric ratio, which is called tangent. And the word trigonometry is very simply the study of triangles. So before we can actually do this, we need to understand the different kinds of sides that we have when we talk about these ratios. And the very first thing that you always want to be aware of is when you use these ratios, we have 3 of them that we're going to study, you have to have a right triangle. You have to. If you don't, then you cannot use this. And the way to get around that, you will see in pre-calculus. But we're not there yet, so we're going to just go ahead and use tangent. So let's take one of these angles, for example, and we're just going to call it x. Now, whatever angle that you're dealing with, these 3 sides of this triangle have special relationships with this degree measure. The nice thing is the hypotenuse will always be the hypotenuse. So I'm just going to label the hypotenuse as it is. That's not going to change. Now, the side directly opposite it, which I think is really easy because, as you see, I marked this blue angle with an arc. If I were to shoot an arrow straight through it, just like Robin Hood, the opposite side would be the side that it would hit. So this is going to be my opposite side. Alright, now, the side that is not the hypotenuse that this degree measure touches is called the adjacent side, which is this guy down here. Now, if you're not sure about the adjacent side, it's always the hardest one to find. Find where the hypotenuse is, find where the opposite side is. The one that's left over is your adjacent side. Now, the way that the tangent ratio works is tangent says this, and its abbreviation is TAN, like you're going tanning. I would say tangent of whatever degree measure that I have is equal to the opposite side divided by over the adjacent side. So the way that we calculate a lot of these values is using our calculator. A mathematician a very long time ago, who I cannot remember the name of, spent his entire life coming up with all these tangent values, as well as the other 2 that we're going to see. So we're going to have to use our calculator for this, and I will show you how to do that. The way that I'm going to guide you through this tutorial is with a calculator right by my side, so I can show you the values, and we will work on that in class together as well. So let's take a look at an example and see how exactly to set up this kind of information. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. I'm leaving all this other information up so that we have it to refer back to. But let's say I wanted to write the tangent ratio for, let's pick an angle here. Let's pick T. Okay. So this is how I set it up, and I write my fraction bar. Now I want to figure out what the side opposite angle T is. Once again, if you draw an arc mark through that angle, and if it's like a bow and arrow and you shoot an arrow, what is it going to hit? It's going to hit 4. So 4 is going to be my opposite side. And then my adjacent side is the other side that's not the hypotenuse. And in this case, it looks like it's going to be 3. So that's all you have to do when you set these up. Let's do the same thing, but with tangent of angle U. So once again, we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to shoot our arrow across, and this time it's going to hit 3. That's my opposite side. And this time my adjacent side is 4. So that's all you have to do. If all it asks you to do is just set up your ratio, just like that. Okay, here's our first example where we have to use our calculator. But the very first thing that we want to do is we have to set up our ratio in order to know what we're actually doing. So the angle measure that I'm looking at here is going to be the 54 degrees. We don't really ever use the 90-degree angle. So we're going to do tangent of, I'm going to keep it in parentheses, 54 degrees is equal to the opposite side. Alright, there's my bow and arrow. It's going to W. So W over 10 is what I'm going to have. Now, before we try solving for W, I want to make something very clear. This whole entire piece, as it is, moves as 1. The 54 degrees is not a separate value from tangent. Tangent of 54 degrees works 1 in together and not separately. So if you happen to move just the 54 or just the tangent somewhere along the equal sign, you're doing it wrong. You have to move both the tangent and the 54 degrees at the same time with each other. Now, that being said, I want you to take a look at the right-hand side of this equation. In order for me to solve for W here, since W is being divided by 10, it seems pretty common sense that all I would have to do is to multiply this by 10, and I'm going to try to squeeze that in. Okay, and then the tens will cancel each other out. And whatever I do to the right-hand side, I must do to the left-hand side, so where am I going to put that 10? And the answer is just put it in front of tangent. Since tangent and 54 have to be a team, just put it out in front. Okay, so now I have, and I'm just going to reverse this, I like my variable on the left-hand side. W is equal to 10 times the tangent of 54 degrees. So here's how we do this. The first thing that we want to do is, on your graphing calculator, you want to locate where the TAN button is, the tangent. And it's 2 buttons above the 9 if you're using a TI. And that's the calculator I'm going to use for this example. We will see how to use Casio in our classroom. So all you do is you type it in, and you're going to be able to hear my buttons clicking as I do this. So I'm going to type 10 times, I'm going to press that tangent button, and now it's going to prompt me to put in an angle measure, so I'm just going to type in 54, and I press enter, and it pops at a decimal place. And whenever it gives you that decimal, you're going to give me 3 decimal places always. So 6.738 is my answer here, just like that. And that's all you got to do for this. Now, what about if it's the other way around? What if W is the adjacent side and not the opposite? Well, the process becomes a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to erase everything here to show you an example like that. Okay, so here we go. So I have my degree measure. It's 28 degrees. So I'm going to write tangent of 28 degrees is equal to, and it's opposite over adjacent. So opposite is 1, and adjacent is going to be the non-hypotenuse side, which is W. Alright, so now how am I going to solve this? Well, just like in the previous example, to get rid of what we divided by, we just multiply both sides by that value. So I'm going to multiply this side by W. It will cancel those W's out. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the left-hand side. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel these guys out, and I'm going to write my new equation. So this is W times the tangent of 28 degrees equals 1. Now, once again, I am trying to solve for just this guy. And he is being multiplied by a tangent of 28. So in order for me to cancel it out, what's the opposite of multiplication? It is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by the tangent of 28 degrees. Like I said before, the tangent and the 28 have to move together. Alright, so there we go. So now these tangents are going to cancel each other out. All I'm left with is W equals whatever that fraction is. So I'm going to type in my calculator 1 divided by the tangent of 28 degrees, and it pops out a negative answer, which I was not expecting, but it's negative 3.553. And so that's how you do those kinds of problems. Now, we only have one other example to look at, and that is when I actually don't know my degree measure. I know the two sides of the opposite side and the adjacent side, but I don't know the degree measure. Yikes. Well, let's take a look. Okay, here's our last example. Bear with me. So here we have our triangle. It's a right triangle, which we need. And I know that my degree measure is X. I don't know what it is. So when I set this up, I'm going to write it like this. So tangent of x degrees equals. And once again, my opposite side, it looks like it's going to be 41, and my adjacent side is 100. Okay, now there is really nothing else to do at this point in time but to use our calculator to help us. But how do we get rid of the x if the tangent has to go with it? And the answer is that we do something that is called inverse. And what inverse allows us to do is to solve for a missing degree measure. That's all it does, and it's really helpful. Now, the way that it looks is it looks like a little exponent. And I read it like this: tangent of the inverse tangent of, the inverse tangent of whatever ratio that we have, 41 over 100, will give us that degree measure. So that's what inverse helps us to do. And when you look at your calculator, if you look directly above tangent, not the next button, but just in blue or yellow, you'll see tangent to the -1, and that means that that's the inverse. So what I'm going to do, you have to press the second button to get there. So I'm going to do second times tangent, and then I'm just going to enter in that ratio, 41 divided by 100. And I'm going to press enter, and it tells me that x is equal to 0.389 degrees. It's a super tiny degree measure, but that is how you do that. So inverse allows us to solve for the missing degree measure if we know the opposite side and the adjacent side using tangent. And that concludes this tutorial.